Welcome to this session on strategies for CAT 2014. We know there have been a lot of changes that the IIMs have made to the CAT. So what we'll do in the next half an hour is look at what is the specific impact and then figure out what strategies that we need to adopt to be able to do well in CAT 2014. My name is Gejo Sreenivasan and I'm a mentor at Career Launcher. Before you actually watch this video, I would recommend you to watch the video session by GP, which is CAT 2014 Decoded, where he gives you a very holistic perspective on the changes and its impact. Now, before you actually watch this session, please go to his blog www.gpkafunda.com and watch that video. In this video session, we'll focus on one particular aspect, which is the strategies for CAT 2014. Let me start with a few disclaimers. One, there are a lot of things that we know about CAT, a lot of things that we don't know. So, for instance, we don't know, for instance, how many questions of reading comprehension will come. Therefore, to be able to make certain strategies, we need to make certain logical assumptions. So, whatever the strategy that I'm presenting is based on certain assumptions. And whenever I've made those assumptions, I'll clearly mention those assumptions so that you can get an idea about how I've arrived at certain conclusions. And lastly, you're advised to use your judgment before you act on the recommendation that I'm presenting. So let's start. There are certain things that we are told, there are certain things that we are not told. What are the things that we are told? It's a two-section test, be 50 questions each, 170 minutes. There are no sectional time limits, which means you can actually jump between sections. This is welcome news for many. And there is of course sectional cutoffs, which means that there is a cutoff for section 1, there's a cutoff for section 2, and then there is an overall cutoff. What are the changes from CAT 2013? The CAT 2013 had 2 sections. Even this next CAT will have 2 sections. 2013 had 30 questions in each of the section. Now it has gone up to 50 questions. The time was 70 minutes per section in 2013. That is 140 minutes in total. You have additional 30 minutes. Now what would that mean is the time per questions on an average would have reduced a bit. But it's still not become really a speed test. You still have a reasonable amount of time to solve a question. 2013 had sectional time limits. Here you don't have sectional time limit. It's both an opportunity and a burden. Now the burden is on you to figure out how to manage your time well. So there is that one element of time management which is going to be very critical, which we will discuss in this particular section. Sectional cutoff has always been there, so that has not changed. But there are a few things that we are not told. One, the type of questions. For instance, we don't know whether critical reasoning would be there or not there. We don't know what types of grammar questions would come. They have not told us. We are not told what specific types of questions from algebra would come. 2, we don't know the breakup of the question in each of the area. What we know is the 2 sections. Section 1 would be QA and DI. Section 2 would be VA and logical reasoning. VA is verbal ability. By the way, QA is quantitative ability, DI data interpretation. VA is verbal ability, LR is logical reasoning. So QA, DI is one section, VA, LR is another section. But then we don't know how many questions of DI would come. We don't know that. How many sets of DI would come? We have no idea. Reading comprehension, how many questions of reading comprehension would be there in the CAT? No, we don't know. How many sets of questions would come? We don't know. But for us to make certain strategies, we should have a reasonable idea as to what could be a likely scenario. Now this is going to be an important question for us to answer. The third thing that we don't know is the number of answer choices. It can be either 4 multiple choice questions or it can be even 5 multiple choice questions. Last year it was 4 choice questions, but we know if you look at earlier CATs, we have seen CAT which has got 5 questions. So we don't know which one, at least we are not told. Maybe in the days to come, if IIMs clearly spells this out, then we'll fine tune our strategy. But currently we'll have to go with whatever information that we have and certain logical assumptions that we make. So we'll have to go ahead and make certain assumptions. For the type of questions, this is my assumption. No major changes in the specific type of questions. And this is very fair assumption to make. For instance, what does this mean is you've taken a lot of proctored mock CATs. You've taken a lot of questions in the test team adaptive. We've also done a lot of questions from Funda book, your class sheet, and all these questions would be very, very relevant to the type of question that is going to be asked in the CAT. So you would see the type of questions more or less would be what you've encountered in your preparation. So your preparation that you've done so far is absolutely relevant. So we'll not worry too much about the type of questions, but we definitely will have to worry about the breakup of question in each area. And here is where we'll have to make certain critical assumption. And the assumption is this, that the CAT will be similar in composition to that of CAT 2004 and 2008. Now let me give you a logic as to why I arrive at this particular assumption. A, if you look at the history of CAT, till 2008 there was one story. The CAT was conducted by IIMs. It was a paper-based test. And then from 2009 till 2013, it was conducted by Prometric. It was not only conducted by Prometric, the test was also created by Prometric. In 2014, it's TCS which is going to conduct the test, but it's very, very safe to assume that TCS will not be creating the question. The questions would be created by the IIMs. Therefore, what does that mean? You can go back and look at these CAT to get some insights as to how the CAT would be. Therefore, we have taken CAT which are recent in the sense the last few CATs the IIMs have created, and we'll use that to make some sense of the breakup of questions in each area. So that is what we will do. The last is about number of answer choices. Now whether it's 4 or 5 is anybody's guess. If it's 5 answer choice, it can be troubling for a few of you, maybe many of you. Now imagine solving reading comprehension question using 5 answer choices. With 4 itself we struggle, we end up eliminating 2. I don't know what we'll do when there are 5 answer choices. So therefore it will be a good idea to also solve questions which have got 5 answer choices. I'm sure these are available in the resources given to you by Career Launcher. There is one small impact to this. Negative marking, when with 4 answer choices, it will be 1/3 negative marking. And there are 5 answer choices, it will be 1/4 negative marking. This is what the IIMs have followed, and that is what they will again follow, should they choose between these 4 or 5 answer choices. So what we'll currently do is not worry too much about the type of question, and also not worry about the answer choices. We'll focus on the breakup of questions on each area to be able to create strategies. So let's start somewhere, and here is where we'll start. What we'll do is, like we've already discussed, we'll analyze CAT from 2004 to 2008 to figure out the probable distribution of questions in 2014. We'll do 2 levels of analysis, one at a very broad level in terms of the number of questions from QA, from DI, from VA, and so on and so forth. And then we'll do a specific area-wise analysis. For instance, in QA, what has been the distribution in the past? How many questions on numbers? How many questions on algebra? And use that kind of to make sense of what could be the likely CAT 2014 paper. Once we do that, the next thing that we'll do is we'll look at some test taking strategy based on the conclusion that we drew from here. But we'll keep certain things in mind. One is, whatever we are doing is based on assumptions. Therefore, we must be flexible to take care of any surprises the CAT might throw at us. So we'll not keep a very rigid strategy. Now, we hope that CAT will, so the IIMs will bring a little more clarity into what is a paper. At that point in time, we'll tweak our strategy or maybe make a little rigid, but it is always advisable to keep your strategy flexible so that we'll able to take care of anything that the CAT will throw at us. We'll also keep things pretty simple. We'll not complicate it too much. We just want to have a fair idea and a reasonable kind of a strategy. So let's analyze. Now, if you look at CAT 2014 to, CAT 2004 to 2008 paper, it was a 3-section test. But 2014 is a 2-section test. The 3-section used to be QA, DILR, and then VA. Now the 2-section would be QA and DI would be one section, and VA and LR is another section. So we'll have to do some tweaking to the 2004-2008 data that we have. Now this is what we'll do. We'll kind of redistribute the 3-section test of 2004 to 2008 into a 2-section CAT. By that what I mean is I will club these two together in this test, I'll club these two together. In this test, like this, quantitative ability, DI, and DS is data sufficiency. There have been certain questions of data sufficiency which are asked in 2004 to 2008, and we'll club like this and then do the analysis. But at a very broad level, if you look at these early paper, you had QA, you had DILR, and we have VA. Almost the distribution is almost the same from 2004 to 2008. So we could kind of expect that. So we could see, let's say QA, DI, VA, and LR. What we could expect broadly is about 35 questions here. VA about 35 questions, DILR put together about 30 questions. That'll be a 15 kind of distribution. Anyway, let's look at this paper 2004-2008 CAT to see whether this is true or not. Now let's start with section 1, distribution. So section 1, mind you, was quantitative ability and data interpretation. Let's look at how it was from 2004 till 2008. DS is, like I told you, data sufficiency. What you see is there have been certain questions of data sufficiency that has been asked in the past. In 2007, it was almost 20% of the number of questions within DS plus DI plus QA. So we can expect data sufficiency question. We will kind of make a strategy based on the worst case scenario. So let's expect certain DS questions, and you would see quantitative ability is almost about 50 to 60% of the total number of questions. Actually 60, close to about 60%, not even 50, sorry, close to about 60%. So based on this, a likely CAT 2014 would look something like this. There's 50 questions, in all probability would get distributed of about 30 questions from QA, 5 questions from data sufficiency, and 15 questions from DI. Obviously there can be a plus minus 1 or 2, but broadly this is what you can expect. If there is no data sufficiency, in all likelihood there will be 35 questions from QA. Let's look at section 2 at a very broad level. Section 2 comprises verbal ability and logical reasoning. And within verbal ability you have reading comprehension, you have English usage, and then you also have verbal reasoning. By English usage I mean questions based on grammar, also questions based on vocabulary. By verbal listening I would mean things like para jumbles, para completion, critical reasoning, and so on and so forth. So let's look at how 2004 to 2008 have been. Now if you look at reading comprehension, you would see that 2008 is a significant number of questions from reading comprehension, barring probably a 2005. So the number of reading comprehension questions have been significant. You also see verbal reasoning and English usage almost equal distribution. In 2006 there were no questions on English usage, but in 2007 there are in fact more questions on English usage, that is grammar plus vocab. Okay. And then you have logical reasoning, which has gone kind of like this. Okay, so we'll probably keep it at that level. Now this is likely what you can expect based on the distribution, the total 50 questions, logical reasoning about 15, reading comprehension 15, verbal reasoning and English usage almost equally distributed to take care of the remaining 20. Now one thing is, in all likelihood it's going to be 4 sets. It may not be a 5 sets. It could be possible, but more likely it's going to be 4 sets, and more likely that there will be 4 passages. Also DI, which we discussed the last slide, will also be about 4 sets. But you must be also prepared for a 5 set DI, 5 set LR, 5 set RC, but this is a highly unlikely. We look at this would be what it is. Now let's go individually with respect to QA. Now this is modern math. By modern math, I've included permutations, combination, probability, and set theory. Geometry is the usual suspect. In algebra, apart from linear equations, quadratic equations, I've also included questions on functions, maxima, minima, and all that within algebra. Arithmetic would be ratios, percentage, time to distance, time and work, and so on and so forth. In numbers, apart from the standard type of questions like on remainders, HCF, LCM, factors, multiples, factorials, I've also included Diophantine equations. By Diophantine equations, I mean equations which have integer solutions. For example, x square minus y square equal to 400. How many integer solution does it have? It's actually more of number based logic rather than geometry, rather than algebra. So I have whichever question needed concept on natural numbers like factors, multiples, remainders, I've clubbed it in numbers. Okay. Now let's go ahead and look at it. So you would see algebra ruling most of the CAT, and we can expect the same to happen. In fact, even in CAT 2013, 2012, you see a lot of questions in algebra, and that won't change. But you'll also see numbers. A reasonable number of questions for numbers. In fact, numbers plus arithmetic, if you club it together, you would find more number of questions than what you would probably see or probably saw in CAT 2013. Left to IM, in all probability, you will expect this number of questions to increase from what we saw in 2013. Every year, you'll always find a few questions from modern math. So based on this, if you take the average, this is probably what you can expect in CAT 2014, where the plus or minus 2, you would find about 7 questions from numbers, about 5 questions from arithmetic. Algebra would be about 10 questions. Geometry would be about 5 to 6 kind of a range. Modern maths would be about 2 to 3 questions. And you can expect about 5 questions from data sufficiency. Now data sufficiency will use one of these concepts, but I kept it separately because the way in which you answer a data sufficiency questions is very different from how you answer the other problem solving questions of mathematics. So I think the critical areas would be algebra, numbers, and a lot of people will be happy to see questions from arithmetic. How is a VA being distributed? Let me quickly explain what I mean by each of these vocabulary based questions. You could have questions on phrasal verb or homophones or usage, those kind of questions. Grammar based questions you would know, sentence correction or error detection. By TC I mean text completion. Or you could say sentence completion. These are those questions where you have 2 blanks and then you're given options A, B, C, D, and you're supposed to figure out which words is likely to best fit these blanks. Those kind of questions would be text completion. By CR I mean critical reasoning. From 2004 to 2008 you've only found critical reasoning once. Before that, before 2004 you found there were quite a few questions from critical reasoning. PC is paragraph completion. So every year from 2004 to 2008 you'll find a certain number of questions, except in 2004 when it was replaced by critical reasoning. And PJ is para jumbled. These set of questions missing in 2008, but you've seen para jumbles every year from 2009 onwards. So RC is reading comprehension. You would see a significant percentage of questions, even in case there are more RC questions than the rest. So based on this will be the likely distribution. You can expect about 15, even maybe slightly more than 15. The reading comprehension questions, para jumble, para completion, reasoning, all that put together would be about 10. And then you would expect about 5 questions on grammar and 5 questions on vocabulary. So this is a logic that we have used to arrive at a kind of prediction for CAT. And if you put the prediction together, this is how it's going to look. You can probably pause the video and go through it and understand what is the distribution. We will now look at how this distribution will impact the strategy. So first let's look at CAT 2014 to CAT 2013, because most of you have been preparing for the CAT, have been basing the preparation on the previous year's CAT paper. Some of you have taken CAT 2013 as well. Most of you would have already taken mock test, which is based on CAT 2013. Now you've just started taking mocks based on CAT 2014 pattern. So it's a good idea to have a look at how these match. Now if you look at section 1, broadly, for example, let's look at DI for instance. This was out of 30 and this is out of 50. Now the percentage of this is 30% DI, and here also is 30%. So what we see is within DI and quant, in terms of composition, it will be 30% and 70%. So that has not changed much. And also if you look at within each areas of CAT, this should be about from 6, it will almost double. From 7, we expect an increase in algebra, but geometry will more or less remain the same. It can even almost the same. Geometry would almost remain the same, and modern maths will be a few more questions. The key impact has happened on largely these 3 areas, and DI will continue to hold prominence, because remember last year, out of the 30 questions, 9 was DI and 21 was quant, and we are trying to get about 15 questions from here. So our strategy used to be about solving 6 questions from here and remain 9 questions from here. So the broad strategy will remain the same. DI will be still as important, but the key impact would be there will be more questions on level 1 and level 2. That is simply because you had 21 questions in quant before. Now you have about 30, even if I add data sufficiency, about 35 questions. So you can say that questions can be in level 1, level 2, level 3. The number of questions in level 1 in 21 will be less, but number of questions in level 1 would be in 35 would be more. So you'll get more questions on level 1 and level 2. Thereby, you will see an increase in the attempt because of the fact that you are offered more questions. Thereby, I believe that the overall difficulty level of the paper would look somewhat simpler than what it was in CAT 2013. But the biggest impact has happened in section 2. And I'll tell you what that impact is. Now this is total 30 questions. This is total 50 questions. This is CAT 2013. That is CAT 2014. Now there are a lot of people who want to take out, let's say, about 18 questions from here. The strategy used to be, don't solve RC. Solve all the 9 questions from LR. Solve all the 5 questions of parajumble. This also includes those odd sentence in a sequence. All these questions, leave out grammar, leave out vocabulary based questions. So 8 plus 9, already we are about 17 questions. Now theoretically, so which means I probably do about a couple of RC or maybe 1 RC and focus everything on this area, which means I can get away actually by not solving RC, theoretically at least, not focusing on grammar and not focusing on vocabulary based questions. Or for some of you who is weak in logical reasoning, can solve RC and knock out this 8 from here, let's say 8 from here and 8 from here, and get about 16 attempts. So you kind of had a choice between, in that sense, had a choice between RC or LR. I think that will change completely. I'll tell you why. If you look at grammar, it's about 3 questions from the total 30. Grammar and vocabulary based questions. These two put together is 10%. Here, 5 on the total is 50. Sorry, 5 plus 5 is 10 on the total is 50. That is 20%. Which basically means, can I ignore grammar? No. Can I ignore vocab? No. But can I improve? How much can I improve from today till the day of CAT? So therefore, you have a choice now to make. You can obviously do well in these 10 questions, which basically means that if you want to get to the cutoff, you need your RC and you need your logical reasoning. For some of you, this is really good news. For those of you very good in grammar and vocab. But even so, you'll still end up making mistakes in grammar, and there'll be still questions on vocabulary that you'll not be able to handle. So therefore, this is a key impact that can't leave out RC. So for those of you, just get back, start solving RC again. You need your RC if you want to go to an IM. So that is how you look at CAT 2014 as opposed to CAT 2013. Let's get into a certain strategy, and whatever strategies that I'm presenting to you, please bear in mind these are my thoughts, my view. Obviously you will have to tweak it, change it according to your strength, your weakness, but you will get a fair amount of idea how we can go about it. So this is where we'll start. We need to get at least 98 percentile in each of the section, maybe 97 percentile is what we need in each of the section, or at least a 95 percentile in each of the section. We're looking at about getting 50% of the questions correct in the first section, about 60% of the questions from the second section, which is VNLR. This has been the case always. You normally typically see QA cut off about between 45% to 50%, the VA cut off about 55% to 60%. I've taken the upper side, about 50%. This would be fairly good enough to get you to an IM. In terms of number of questions, this is what it would mean, that you should be able to get about 25 questions out of the 50 questions from Q and DI correct. Now, accuracy is important. If you can solve 25 and get all 25 correct, it'll be great. But what you don't want to do is get into the range of 70% accuracy or 75% accuracy. You want to have an accuracy as close as 90%, so that you're attempting less, but ensuring that everything is correct. And VNLR, out of the 50 questions, you could knock off about 30 questions. Okay, so that's a broad level. So you can take this as a rough benchmark in terms of section 1 about 25 questions and section 2 about 30 questions. Now let's look at how do I get 25 questions out of section 1. What we know is we have about 30 questions from QA, we'll have about 15 questions from DI, and we'll have about 5 questions from data sufficiency. What I want is knock about 12 out of this 30. I'm hoping that we'll find a lot of round 1 question or level 1 question, and I believe about 8 to 10 would be the level 1 kind of a question that we can get. If you distribute this into level 1, level 2, level 3 equal distribution, you will find 10, 10, 10, L1, L2, L3 kind of a question. The idea is to ensure that you solve this and probably knock off a couple of them from there. So about 4, so about 12 from here, about 10 out of 15. If you're not able to achieve this, then you'll have to end up solving questions on level 2 and level 3. So, which will be slightly tricky. So, idea is to maximize your score from DI so that burden of QA is less. And then if DI is about 3 out of 5 questions. So, you can even look at it like this, QA plus data sufficiency, you want to take about 15 questions. That's the idea. So, 15 out of 35 from there, and then from here about 10 out of 15. Now if you find DI tough in a particular paper, then you'll have to bank on QA to give you that extra mark. But this will be fairly what we will do. Section 2 to get 30 questions out. Now LR there are 15 questions, RC there are 15 questions, EU would be about 10. By EU I mean English using grammar and vocabulary based question. By verbal reasoning I mean para jumble, para completion. Verbal reasoning you can at least answer the question using logic. Here you need to have knowledge to handle. So this is, you need logic, and this you need knowledge. Now if you have the knowledge, it will be fantastic. If you don't have the knowledge, this is where we're going to hit. You don't want to take a risk. Please don't take a risk. Don't mark any questions on English usage based on gut feel. And that is the biggest issue that we have. We end up marking a lot of questions in EU, get about 50% accuracy. So what we want is only mark the question that we are sure. We can still make mistake, but mark only those questions which are sure. And this is like, I'm hoping we'll get about 8 we can knock off from here, maybe 2 to 3 questions from here, somewhere close to a range of 10. This is the impact that I was talking about. Last year, you could have got many questions out of EUVR because there were more number of questions of verbal reasoning. I think in CAT 2014, you will see that your at least the marks or number of attempts will reduce. You might attempt a lot of questions, you end up making mistakes. So 10 is what you can expect, which means you need 10 and 10 from RC. And this would be a big question mark for most of you. And it's highly unlikely that you're going to solve all the 15 logical reasoning questions and then only solve 5 here. So this kind of a scenario is very unlikely. So, or maybe a likely scenario would be about 8 to 10 here, about 8 to 10 questions from reading comprehension, about 10 to 12 questions from EU. So there you go. Now that we know a fair idea of how many questions we need to get from each sub area, let me also remind you there won't be any cutoff for sub areas. For example, in section 2 there will be one cutoff, which is based on this 30 question. It doesn't matter from where you get this 30 questions from. Yeah, I'm just saying to get the 30 questions, this would be the kind of distribution. Now let's get into time management. Let's look at section number 1. How do we allocate time? So what we have is 170 minutes. So let's see. Since most of these questions would be about level 1 or maybe even level 2 that we'll end up attempting, and we might take time to read other questions, decide, we might also get stuck somewhere and leave the question all put together. I'm assuming that we should be able to knock off this question in about 2.5 minutes per question. We need about 30 minutes, half an hour to get to about 12 questions. And about 2 minutes to solve about 5 questions of data sufficiency. So otherwise, these two put together, QA and DS put together, we want to spend about 35 to about maximum 40 minutes and try and get about 15 questions right. And this will be a challenge. The key would be your skill to identify simple questions and answer them. Also, you knowing all the basics of the areas tested in QA so that you don't leave out the simple questions presented to you. Most of the time that happens, there are simple questions you're not able to solve just because you don't know the basics. So, and then you end up solving the level 2, level 3 questions of the area that you think is your strength, and then you struggle there. Yeah. Alright, so and then we have DI. In DI, I'm giving about 13 minutes per set because we'll probably solve out of the 4 sets. We can hope to solve about 3 sets that to reach about 10 questions. I'm also counting the time that we'll end up wasting. You've read it, we've got stuck in the middle, then we shifted. All put together about 30 minutes will be safe. We want about 40 minutes for this particular area. So these 3 put together would be 30 plus 40, about 75. Out of the 170 minutes. Now you might be wondering, 170 divided by 2 would be 85 minutes. Why am I not spending a lot of time? A lot of people have this idea that you spend more time for QA. My suggestion is to stick to this, because in section 2, you have these 2 chunks, logical reasoning and reading comprehension, which requires time. Now that we have to solve reading comprehension, we have to give time for reading comprehension, right? Which means we cannot afford to spend time in other areas. Reading comprehension deserves time because I have to read the passage, understand, and then solve. Alright, so the key would be to start here, about 15 minutes, 1.5 minutes per question. At least you'll all the vocabulary based questions or grammar based questions you'll quickly solve. Parajumble slightly more time, so all put together about 1.5 minutes will be reasonable here. It's about 15 minutes. I'm thinking you will have to spend about 40 minutes. So let's say if there are 4 RC passages, you have 2 choices. One choice that you have is you choose 3 RC passages, leave out 1, and kind of try and solve all the questions. Or read all the 4 RC passages, but don't solve all the questions, solve 2 to 3 from each passage. I always recommend this approach because I'm choosing questions and not necessarily passages. And some people are comfortable with this. You stick to whichever you're comfortable with, but I recommend this simply because I'm kind of forced to solve questions that are difficult and then end up getting it wrong. So I will want to read 4 RC passages, which is why I've given 40 minutes, about 10 minutes per passage, including time to reading and solving. The size of the passage is going to be very similar to what we had last year. That will not change, even though CAT 2004-2008 RC passage were bigger. The 2014 RC passage will be similar to 2013 CAT because it's still an online test. So it's highly unlikely that the size of the passage is going to be bigger. So you'll be able to handle it in about 10 minutes. And logical reasoning, again, 40 minutes. Out of the 4 sets, we'll try and solve about 3. If we can get 4, it'll be awesome. But at least aim to get about 3. Now these 40 minutes also will include the time that you'll end up wasting. So this would mean that if you add all this, it's about 95 minutes. So the reason why extra time went to section 2 than section 1 is because I believe because of these 2 chunks, RC and LR. Now if you are good in RC, then maybe you can tweak. So this is probably where you can start. And then depending upon how you're faring in each of the proc mocks that you're taking, you can make further tweaks. So this will be the whole plan. One is target 25 questions in the section 1, allowed about 75 minutes. Try and knock off 15 questions from the 35 minutes for QS and DI put together. DI about 10 questions in 40 minutes. That's the game plan. Section 2 target 30 plus questions, allowed about 95 minutes. 10 questions in 15 minutes. That is from EU and VR. 10 questions in 40 minutes from our reading comprehension. And 10 questions in 40 minutes from logical reasoning. Roughly that should be a game plan. You could also shift, you can go in any order. Maybe you can start with QA, then go to simple level 1 questions of QA, go to EU VR. Okay, spend about 25 minutes, spend about 15 minutes, finish off your 40 minutes, and then move to RC. You could do all that, yeah, but my suggestion would be you'll have to give these many minutes for each of these chunk. The order in which you want to take this chunk of questions is up to you, based on your strength and weaknesses. So what will be your study plan? Now that we have clearly identified DI, LR and RC. Now imagine this, 15 questions, 15 questions, 15 questions. That is 45 questions out of 100. That is significant. So please ensure that you go to your test team adaptive, solve DI, RC, LR a day, every single day. That I put it like one diligent practice. Whatever you do, you ensure that this is happening so that you are able to handle the most crucial area of the CAT. What you also want to do in August is to complete all basics, especially for quant. These are largely significant. The students who have started their preparation 3 months back or 6 months back. I'm sure that there will be certain areas that you still have to complete all that. For those of you who have starting for this month, then you probably will have to kind of hope that these 2 things will take care of your CAT. And what you want to do is 1 more mock per week to start off with. Figure out your best strategy. Do a little bit of experiment so that you will not too many experiments, basic experiments, so that you figure out what could be a best strategy in terms of allotting time and stuff like that. Ensure that you do analysis. This is very crucial. Unless after every mock, remember, mock is like a mirror. It only gives you a reflection of your current state. It's like it's like a mirror, right? So if you want to improve your looks, you can't keep on looking at the mirror. What is important is what you do between 2 visits to the mirror. So in the same way, you'll have to ensure that you do a lot of work between mocks. Okay? In September, we'll add this, and we will clearly, in Proctor mock, we'll use to work on weakness. Whatever is the weakness that we can eliminate, we'll try and eliminate. So we still have 2 more months. So September you should do that, and you should start solving past CAT papers from 2001 to 2008. A lot of questions, so I'm assuming that is also slipped to October. September, October you can use that to solve past CAT papers from 2001 to 2008. And then in the month of October, you ensure you focus on your strength and make your strength area stronger, which basically would mean that For any weak areas, you try and solve your strong areas in lesser time and give more time for the weak areas, stuff like that. Those kind of things is what we want to do. You will go to about 2 mocks per week. And November is you were getting into the groove. You keep doing 3 mocks per week. But diligently solve this. And especially reading comprehension, that I'm sure most of you have not been serious about. Now keep yourself updated. First, I want all of you to subscribe to gpkafunder.com. It is the blog written by GP. I also contribute a lot of articles to this blog, so you will get a lot of insights into how a lot of insights in various entrance tests. So this is a good idea. Register at careerlauncher.com/exam corner. You will keep on getting updates about tests, any new initiative that Career Launcher is doing and all that. And definitely visit Facebook, like our page. It also keep yourself updated. So thank you. This is Gejo signing off. I hope this video session was beneficial. If you have any query, you can write to me. This is my email, gejo@careerlauncher.com, or you can also leave a query at gpkafunder.com, and I'll be more than happy to resolve your queries. Thank you so much.